So it's my honor this evening to be joined by Sherri Mandel. For better or for worse, the details of Sherri's life are globally known at this point. In May 2001, her son Koby was murdered just outside the settlement of Tekoa in Israel. Subsequently, Sherri and her husband Seth started the Koby Mandel Foundation, which she will talk about in the course of the evening, which is essentially there to deal with grief and bereavement for people who've suffered loss. And as well, Sherri has written 2 books, The Blessings of a Broken Heart, which was the National Jewish Book Award winner, and her second book, The Road to Resilience. And Sherri and I have been in conversation before and are sort of very interested in the theme of resilience and kind of wanted to focus on that this evening more than anything else. Something that I've talked about with Sherri before is that the kinds of things that she discusses remind me of Samuel Beckett, except in reverse. In Beckett's play Waiting for Godot, 2 tramps, Didi and Gogo, spend all of their time trying to pass the time because they have nowhere to go and nothing to do. And they spend a lot of time saying, let's go, and they don't move. And that's the constant refrain in the play. Let's go, and they don't move. When you read Blessings of a Broken Heart, it's the exact reverse. It's, we can't move. There's no way we can go on, and yet we do move. And so what I'm really interested in is how you were able to move. And to do that, I want to begin by reading a couple of passages from Sherri's writing to give you an example of just how difficult it would be to move when you're in circumstances of trauma. So for instance, she writes, "The day that we found out that my son was murdered, I don't like to think about that day. But I do know in the afternoon I picked out the beret I would wear to the funeral. I'd been lying in bed crying. I felt paralyzed and that I wanted to die, and I didn't know how we would live. I felt that the entire world had been destroyed. Yet I remember choosing the color of the beret I would wear. I remember thinking to myself how disgusting I was to care, that I was so vain and ridiculous, yet at the same time, I had an intuition that caring might save one. Choosing the color of a hat showed me that not all of my desire had been extinguished. Despite how shattered I felt, I was still alive." And here's another passage taken from Blessing about the funeral. "The rabbi's wife takes a knife and slices a rip in my shirt from the collar, rends my husband's shirt and my children's as well. I do not faint. But my legs don't want to accept the weight of my body. My body wants to collapse, wants to plunge to the earth, wants to disappear. But I don't. I feel like my heart has stopped. This moment is the moment that will stand as forever in my life. But there is something that keeps me upright, that keeps me walking, that keeps me alive. The life force that led to my closet to pick out an outfit for the funeral, the life force that keeps me from collapsing. I think I can't bear this. I can't live anymore. A mother should not have to watch her son put into the ground. A mother should die before her child. A mother should not have to bear witness to the terrible fact that as much as she loves her child, she can't protect him. I wonder where I will find the strength to walk to the grave." And as I open my car door, Gavi, my 6-year-old son, says, "I'm hungry, Mommy." Even at the most tragic, cruelest hour of life, God is pulling me out of my pain by reminding me of a son who is alive and hungry. God is reminding me that life is all around me, even here, surrounded by dead souls. So Sherri, the impulse in your work is what I call the anti-Beckett, right? It's the anti-Beckett. It's the idea that you feel like you can't move, but you do, and you have. And you've indicated that part of it was because you felt you had 3 other children who needed you. But to begin our discussion about resilience, what might be the other factors? Like, how do you find the internal resources to keep moving And more specifically, did you feel there was something in Judaism that was helpful for you in the grieving process? And if so, maybe you can describe it.
Well, just hearing that, it's like too much for me. Because Koby, he was killed 18 years ago, so he would be 32. So, like when I think I'm going to digress a little bit, because definitely when he was murdered, I definitely felt like if you had told me that I would be in Toronto 18 years later and just talking and having a life, I would have said, like, no, I hope I'm dead before that. Because I really, really did not want to live. And now we work with a lot of bereaved mothers. We have a foundation. And in fact, there's a mother in Toccoa whose daughter was killed under very terrible circumstances by terrorists. And her friends came to me and they said, she's talking about killing herself. And I said, every bereaved mother wants to kill herself. Like, that's part of the territory. And I said, of course, keep an eye on her, but like that's what it is. The pain is just too unbearable. And so I know that, Judaism like definitely helps because it gives you a kind of system. And like, for example, there was somebody who came to me, an Israeli, and she came to me to learn Tehillim, to learn Psalms. And I was like not a Psalms person at all. And, I live on a yishuv, on a settlement, so we had a lot of, when there were troubles or somebody was sick, everybody would they'd say, read this psalm, and I was not interested. But this Israeli woman, she came to me, and she said, do you want to learn Psalms? And I said, okay. And we started learning, and I felt like, this is my story. Because it's like good versus evil and unbearable suffering and fighting to continue on. And it was really like the forces of evil versus the forces of good. So also the prayer book, like I'm Baal Tshuva. I didn't start out like religious. I didn't start out covering my hair. Like I went to public school. I had no Jewish education. But there was something in the prayer book after Koby was killed that the words resonated for me because they had a purity. And they were, first of all, like my kids always laugh because it was like I didn't really believe in God. Like I sort of became religious as a result of living in Israel and meeting my husband. And it's not like I didn't believe in God, but I didn't believe. It was like I just didn't feel God. And after Koby was killed, it was like I felt like, you got to help me. Like, you have to help me, Hashem. You just have to help me. So it was like there was no other address, really.
Yeah.
So that also made a difference. But even now, like sometimes when I come back to America or I'm like watching television or listening to the radio and I hear like people speaking or ordinary discourse, especially then, it just offended me. I couldn't tolerate language. And that's something people don't understand, that after a tragedy like that, like ordinary language, it's hurtful because it was like I needed language that was going to give me some kind of, it sounds like a weird word, but like salvation. Like I needed to have language that somehow was an entrance to the world to come. So
can you explain what you mean by
That's
ordinary
very deep.
language? Did you mean mundane language? Just people saying, hi, how are you? kind of
like
language?
just like I was at the, that was another thing I wanted to talk about. Yeah, so I was at the pool, and I remember like people, it was 6 weeks after Koby was killed, and people were like saying, oh, the boots are on sale, like if you buy, this is in Israel, you can buy them on Land's End, I'll have them delivered. And I was like, I couldn't bear that this was like what people were worried about. And then, this is the other thing I want to say. So this was like 5 weeks after Koby was killed, because my friend took me. That's who really saved me, were my friends and family. But, so she took me to the pool, and I remember in the Alon Shvut, if any of you know where that is. And I was in the jacuzzi, and I was like, there were 3 women in there, and I said to them, I didn't know them that well, but I said, one of them I knew, I said, and now I'm always going to be the one with the, whose child was murdered. And she looked at me, and she said, no, you're going to be the woman who smiled in the sauna. Not in the sauna, in the jacuzzi, 5 weeks after her son was murdered. And that to me was like, I still remember it 18 years later, because it was like she offered me like an alternative storyline. Not that it's not alternative.
It's just redefined.
It just gave me a different possibility that I wasn't going to be the miscan. I didn't have to choose to be the miscan. And my community, I think, was so powerful in Tekoa. We were very small then. We were only 200 families, and there were like probably 30 English-speaking families. And they were in my house day and night. In fact, like I have a friend, Jerry, of blessed memory. She died last year of cancer, and she went to Harvard. And I remember I went downstairs one night, and she was cleaning like my bathroom, and there was somebody else on my block. She did my laundry, and there were people just came and talked to us. Also in Israel, it doesn't matter if you know the person, the family, everybody comes into your life. And we had thousands of people come during the Shiva. We had busloads. And I really felt like I felt like personally I was just gonna drown, and like that all these people were just like a raft that kept holding us up. And after the Shiva, then, first of all, I had a very good friend, Shira, who was a grief counselor. In Israel, she worked as an English teacher, but she was a nurse and a grief counselor, and she came to me every day, and she would talk with me and my kids. Koby was the oldest. And then I had another friend, Shulamit, who did EMDR, which is a technique to work against trauma. And Shira also was a massage therapist, so I went every week to her, and I would just cry. And like some days I felt like that I would not be able to make it, that the pain was so overwhelming and so sharp that it would just kill me, but I knew she was coming. So it was somebody else to hold the pain with me. And also my husband was like, we just shared it. We shared it, and 6 weeks after Koby was killed, he was invited to America to speak. But my community, they made sure that like there was this 17-year-old girl, Aviva, and she stayed with us, and so that I wasn't alone. So it was like really the community kept us afloat.
Can you expand a little bit about you and Seth? There are a lot of studies that show when trauma hits, especially with the death of a child, that often the marital bonds fray, in fact, and fall apart. You wrote in your book that things were strong, if not stronger. Did you have any sense of, like, was that just organic, or was there a mindful, deliberate attempt to say we've got to weather this together?
No, we never said it wasn't deliberate. It was like, I just want to say my husband and I were not like this kind of lovey-dovey couple where you would see us and say, oh, they're definitely going to make it. It was just like, I felt like we were the same person. It was like weird. Because he felt it, I felt it, nobody felt it like we did. So it was like we were like our one consciousness. And
true zivug, like connection, like you're meant to be.
But in a sense, you're not saying that. You're saying that.
Yeah, we're not like that.
Well, you're saying you're not. You're saying
we're not.
No, it wasn't
we're not
actually,
really like
no.
that. But there was something that we just went through the experience together in a way that I mean, I don't recommend it to anybody, but it was like really, I felt like we were carrying this tremendous weight. In fact, I think one day we went and we bought him like weights, and we had the backpack. And yeah, we were downtown, we had a backpack filled with weights. And so sometimes like he would go into the store, I said to him, oh, I'll just wait outside so you don't have to carry the weight. And that's how I felt. It was like we were carrying this weight that was so heavy that the only way we could do it was to like share it. And when he wasn't there, it was like I knew he was coming back. But I have like this, I know people who are divorced and go through this, and it's much harder.
Right.
Because it's, you just need so much support.
You've talked about all the structures in your life that were supportive, your family, your community, but you've also mentioned in the books less supportive sort of gestures, and I'm interested in some of the comments that people made to you. I just want to read to you some of the comments that Sherri talks about that people said to her. Grief is a hard thing for people. It's hard to be in the wake of somebody else's grief. It's awkward, and people often make missteps. So, a lot of people will tell you not to cry, that you mentioned several times. A doctor you met at the ceremony celebrating a girl's birth told you with regard to the killing of the 3 boys in 2014, in the summer of 2014, 3 kids were murdered. And he said to you, at least those boys were killed in that car right away. They didn't suffer. I think your son suffered more. And you replied to him, do you think telling me that helps me? That still sort of staggers me that a human being actually said that to you. But you were online in the corner store, the Macolet, and a neighbor of yours looked at you and you said, whenever I feel bad about myself, I look at you.
Oh, God.
And then I don't feel so bad. This is sort of the blooper reel of like what not to say to another human being. But on the other hand, people said tons of supportive things to you as well, and I think there's a very complex dynamic. Do you think people are a little bit psyched out by grief, like freaked out, like they don't know how to deal with it?
Well, it's death, and people,
Right.
It's like the only X-rated thing left, really, is death, because that's like the only thing you really shouldn't talk about or don't talk about, or that isn't like kosher in a way.
It's the great taboo.
Yeah, but with that woman in the Macolet who said that to me, she said, every time I feel bad, I'm just standing in line at the grocery, and there is this tendency to feel like you're ambushed. But, so she said, every time I feel bad, I think about you, and then I don't feel so bad. But so I went home and I told my son, Daniel, and he, I don't know, maybe he's brilliant, of course, because he's my son. But he said, Eva, she didn't mean it like that. She meant that she thinks of what great things you've done. And then she doesn't feel so bad because she sees that you can live through tragedy.
It's a good spin.
But
might be
that's
true.
the thing. It's like you can try to educate people, or you can try to look at it with the good eye. I still get ambushed, like that doctor who said that to me. It's like, but I find that people don't really have a lot of audience awareness. Like, I'm talking in this room. I don't know what you guys have been through, right? And I'm sure a lot of you have suffered something, and that I could say something that would be hurtful without knowing it. So we're all like, we all have experiences of being exposed or being wounded. But like my friend Shira, she said something really important to me, because she said, you're a teacher now. And she's like, you don't have to teach everybody, but you're a teacher and you can tell people when they've said something that's upset you. Also, then I trained to be a pastoral counselor later, and I worked in the hospital, and I worked with very hard patients, like in families of patients in comas. And one thing that you learn as a pastoral counselor is to say, you know, first of all, I'm just going to say right away, like I may say something in the course of our conversation that could be hurtful, and I want you to tell me. And then another thing that's just useful in general is to, when you're talking to somebody, to say, do you mind if, you know, I mention your son? Like, I would much rather somebody say that than, oh, I'm thinking about Koby today. You know, like, I don't want, that to me is an ambush. But if she were to say, is it okay if I talk about Koby now? Because first of all, it gives permission, but it also gives some kind of preparation. So,
Do you feel like that's a good way? Do you feel it's better for people to sort of name the elephant in the room when they talk to
funny,
grieving
you
people?
should, that's my book that you didn't mention.
Oh, right. The new
I have
one.
a children's book called The Elephant in the Sukkah.
Right.
Do I think it's better for people to name it? I think it's good for them to maybe say, is there an elephant here? Rather than say, because then if it's like, what really bothers me, I know it sounds kind of petty, but like people will tell me, oh, when I heard about your son's death, I was on the highway and I had to pull over and like, I don't care. Don't tell me. Unless you say, is it okay if we talk about Koby? Because I don't need, like, I mean, maybe it sounds petty, but I don't really need your pain because I know it goes away. So
Right.
just check in with me.
It's like almost like false empathy in a way. Like they're not thinking of you, they're thinking of themselves and the impact they have on them, right? And
So don't thrust their own narrative onto your narrative. You know, it should be more. If it's
Just
going to
get
be,
permission.
If it's going to be shared. What would you say to people who are in situations where they're with other people in pain or in grief? Best thing just to be silent, just to listen, as opposed to venturing forth some sort of comment and not knowing where you're going?
I mean, it depends. It depends how close you are. Like, I had people say amazing things to me. And also, like during the Shiva, I had people say, I could never understand what you're going through. And then I had people say, I totally understand what you're going through. And some of them I hated on both sides. And it wasn't what they said. It was like, I felt them. It was like, that's the thing, when you're in trauma, it's so beyond words that I felt like I was like an animal, you know, like I could just sense who was safe, who wasn't safe. Also, like I had my friends, I said, put up a sign, we could only talk about Koby or Torah. Like, we put up a sign, the only things that are allowed to be spoken this word in this Shiva are words of Torah or stories about Koby. But I think it's like hard for people to really, in life, to say what they need, what they want, what will work for them. And like grief in a way really gave me that permission. Like I would just one time I was on a bus with somebody, she was talking and talking, I said, you know, I really can't listen to you. And not in a bad way, it's like, those are the facts. So in a way, I felt like it gave me I had like a freedom of truth. And there's something about that is powerful. And also, it was also, I saw the truth. Like, I knew what was important.
How have you converted that in the work you do with the foundation? In other words, you've now been involved, you and Seth and others have been involved in grief work for a long time. Can you maybe describe the overall goal of what you're trying to accomplish there and the means with which you carry it out?
Yes, so we have a camp. We have Camp Koby and Yosef. Koby was killed with Yosef Ishran, who was 14. So we saw right away that our kids, they couldn't come to us because we were crying, we were broken. And kids, we understood that kids were like the silent victims in families like ours. And we wanted to do something to honor Koby. And we really felt like his body was dead, but we could keep we could keep his neshama alive, we could keep his soul alive. And like we were going to do everything we could to do that. And we wanted to do something he would like. So he was 13. He loved having fun, of course. And we decided to do a camp for bereaved children. And we started in 2002, a year after Koby was killed. We had 100 kids at the camp that summer. By 2003, the Intifada was very bad. We had 600 kids, bereaved children at camp from terror. And right away we knew we didn't want it to be a place that was just like have fun and be a distraction. Although that's what the kids, like that's the only thing they really know about camp, is that it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
But we had drama, when it was drama, we had drama therapy, and art was art therapy, and we did like drumming circles, and we did all kinds of healing therapies. And like last year we had our first reunion, even though we've been running the camp for 18 years, we had our first like reunion for Beau Grieving for people who had gone through camp. And one girl came up to me and she looked at me, she said, "You saved my life." She's like, "I had no idea what you were doing at that camp. I thought we were just having fun." Because the kids are really isolated in their grief, because they don't know, even as an adult, everybody's isolated in grief because everybody goes through it differently. But children especially are really isolated in their grief. And when they come together with each other, it's such a relief for them, because even if they don't want to tell their own personal story, they hear other stories and they're in the community, so where it's like they can make jokes, like, black humor, and just they know they're understood, because it's not something that they can really describe to like their friends. Maybe if they're teenagers, but even if they're teenagers, it's really hard, because nobody really understands what has happened to their family. And it's not just the loss, it's like the presence of death. Because once you have death in your life, you're different. You, for better or worse. Like these kids, I feel, have a wisdom because they know what's important. But on the other hand, they can feel very broken, and if there's nobody to hold them, then they can fall apart. And a lot of times the reaction to grief, complicated grief, is delayed, and it can come out 10 years later. And I spoke to a psychologist once, and he told me that like 20 to 25% of psychiatric hospitalizations were due to grief, unprocessed grief. Because it's like bringing a bomb into the house, and if you don't get help detonating that bomb, then it's just going to be there waiting to explode. So that's the main program. It's for the camps, and then we run groups for mothers, for bereaved mothers and widows.
And I guess you have a team of professionals who come in and aid in that process as well. I mean,
yeah, we do like psychodrama. So we have she's a psychodrama therapist, but some of the stuff we do is like fun. We do mosaics with bereaved mothers, but like we do it with glass. So part of it is cutting the glass, and then gluing the glass, and we do it like for 3 hours every other week. And actually, this Sukkot, we had an exhibit of our art. And it was just like, it was totally phenomenal, because the mothers, they organized it. And one, she has such a good eye, she could be a museum curator. And we got there in the morning, we just designed this room. But like, I learned about narrative therapy with the guru was Michael White, who was from Australia.
Mm-hmm.
You know about him?
Yeah.
Because he taught in Israel. He gave a few seminars.
Can you describe what narrative therapy is about?
Well, narrative therapy is when you the way I understand it is you tell your story to the therapist, and you try to find like alternate storylines within the trauma. But what I took from it was that also within the therapy, it doesn't just exist in the office, let's say, that the point is that the client then does something where he brings it out into the community. There's some process of creativity or healing that's shared with the community. And it's called like witnessing. So it's not just the psychologist who's witnessing you, it's like the community at large, or even like a teacher or a parent or a sibling. So there's something about being witnessed, and I feel like that day that we did that mosaics exhibit, because all the families came, but also we had people coming in off the street because it was on Emek Rephaim, and it's just like there's some healing that occurs, but because it's not just yours anymore, it becomes bigger. Like that's in my book, The Road to Resilience. I talk about the 7 C's of resilience, and one of them is creativity. But I also define resilience as like the ability to become larger from challenges rather than to shrink down. And so that was a real process of enlargement, doing that exhibit, because none of us were real artists.
I was going to ask you actually how you defined resilience. You said the ability to become larger. Resilient people do something different with challenges than non-resilient people. Do you think that resilience is a skill that you learn? Is it a temperament that you're born with? How is it that some people seem so resilient in the face of real difficulty and others just can't seem to overcome even the smaller bumps?
Well, I don't know. Because I'm really not a resilient person. That's why I had to write the book. But it's like, who was I talking to? I don't know. I was talking to somebody yesterday. Oh, yeah. And she lost it to her only child. And she said, you just keep going. But I don't think that's really it. I
Right.
think that it's not just keeping going. It's like converting the pain into light. It's not just trudging the same road. And you have to I feel like you find a new road, or you find a road that you didn't even know existed. But, I think it's probably different for everybody, but in the C's, the first C is chaos. And for me, I feel like a lot of people just won't let themselves break apart. But it was my ability to be totally destroyed that I think let me go forward, because a lot of people, I really think resilience starts with the ability to receive. Because it's like when I trained to be a pastoral counselor, I remember I met somebody and he said, sometimes you need an angel and sometimes you become one. And so when you're broken, there will be angels around you. Somebody will come into your life, usually. I can't promise. But lots of times you don't receive them, or you don't identify them, you don't even notice them. And so a lot of it is just saying, I'm going to just take here. I'm just going to take. I'm not going to try to give anything right now.
I want to go back to chaos for a second, because that's actually quite intriguing. You said that it's actually crucial to break down, to feel the sense of being destroyed. And I know a lot of people where they do the opposite. There's this kind of stoicism. They feel like the way to survive is to never let it completely disintegrate. And you're actually arguing that for long-term flourishing, that is actually kind of counterindicated.
Well, if you can take it.
Right.
If you have support, you can go crazy too. My husband was afraid I was going to go crazy. And a lot of people are afraid. It is close to losing your mind. But there is something about it. I'm speaking on kindness tomorrow in Florida. And I was thinking about it because kindness, it's what's it called? Playing it forward? Paying it forward. But I was thinking it's not just that. Because with Bereshit, I was thinking about Hashem created light from chaos. So any time that you find the light, from chaos, it's like you're participating in the creation of the world. So if you don't go into the chaos, then you don't get as strong a light, I think. Not that I think we should go into the chaos. Like, I would never want to go there, and it doesn't always work. Like, I've had other chaotic experiences where, I just fell apart and got sick. It's not like just because you're in chaos, you're going to find the light. But there is something about letting yourself feel what you're feeling. But most people don't want you to. Like, even when I was crying and somebody would like start going like this to me, I was like, I would think to myself, get away from me, because it stopped it. Like, there's a process of, you have to release. And even like in the book, in The Blessing of a Broken Heart, I talk about that I didn't know what to do about my kids. My kids were 11, 10, and 6. Like, how do I cry in front of them? And I asked Shira, and she said, just, time yourself. So that's what I did. I would say to them, I'm just going to cry for a minute. And I would give them the watch, and they would time me. And, like, they'd say, 46 seconds. And then after that, like, they saw after a while, like, it was part of life. But it wasn't overwhelming. And then they didn't even care when I cried, because they knew it was going to stop. It wasn't like, oh, Mommy's crying. But I think in a way that was a gift to them, because it said, yeah, it's like there is sadness here. This is the truth. And we're all broken. And I mean, they didn't cry as easily as I did. And it was hard on them. But in a way they saw that we'll survive. That even when you're broken, it doesn't mean that it's going to be an earthquake. Like, the earth isn't going to open. Maybe there'll be fissures, but the earth, we're still walking.
But that part's tricky, at least the way I'm hearing it, because you could have depressed mothers who, like, how does the kid know that it's going to stop? And how does the kid know that we can survive this? Like, in other words, what's the line between a kind of controlled chaos, which is what you're describing, and chaos?
I'm also curious about what the next C is after chaos.
Oh, okay, I'll get to it. Well, first of all, I just want to say it's not depression. It's like, if a mother's depressed, that's something else. But sadness is not depression. So the other part of it is that we were laughing a lot and having a lot of fun at the same time. Like, even with the kids, I gave them, like, pots, and I said, we're just going to drum, and, like, we'd walk around the house, like, hitting pots, and, like, they still went to school. We still, like, even when I couldn't be a mother, my friends came in and helped. So there were both ends. It wasn't just the crying. Oh, so the C's are, well, you'll have to buy my book. Everybody, because we don't want to carry them back to Israel. No, chaos, then community, choice, which is like the beret, picking the beret, creativity, commemoration, is the way we remember. Oh, consecration, like to make something kind of sacred. In like to do an activity to transform, like we felt like with Koby, like Koby and Yosef were killed in such a cruel way that the consecration was taking all that cruelty and turning it to kindness. And the last one is celebration. I think that with me and my family, like, we have that ability to celebrate. So no matter how bad things got, when we were like on the floor, we would also be telling jokes and laughing. Like, even in the shed, we were laughing at some of the things that happened.
Commemoration. Describe commemoration for me as opposed to consecration. Like, what's the difference between those?
Well, they can be the same thing. But I talked about commemoration because in Judaism, we're always remembering. And I found this study that was about remembering, and it was about the family story. And it said that they found these, I forget who it was, these psychologists, that they found that children who knew their family stories were much more resilient than other children. So, and they tested it with 9/11, and it was things like, do you know where your parents met? Do you know where your grandparents met? Do you know, like, where your mother went to high school? Like, just like basic facts, but somehow that knowledge formed a resilient kid, created a resilient kid. And then I thought about it in terms of Judaism, that really what we have is a family story. And that Judaism, like when you think about, like especially the Parshiot, the Torah portions now, like with Avraham, Lech Lecha, and now we're going to Sarah and the angels, and just all the Imaot and the Avot, the fathers and the mothers, like we know our family story. That is our family story. And that somehow, and also through history, but somehow having that family story creates a resilient people. Because I feel like, you know, I'm telling my personal story, and I don't come from a particularly resilient family, but they must have given me something. But to be able, I think they gave me a lot of joy, my parents. No matter how messed up they were, they gave me a lot of joy, and that really saved me. But the Jewish people are just such a resilient people. I mean, think of what's happening in Israel right now. Like, we're speaking here, and in the south, they're in bomb shelters, like in Ashkelon, Ashdod, and in Otef, Gaza, and like, there's like 30 communities maybe now, or during the day, maybe 20, I don't know, that are going to bomb shelters and having sirens. And it doesn't, I mean, it's terrible, and it can cause a lot of trauma. But it's like the whole Jewish people, we just don't give up. We keep going. But we keep going and we build. That's like the real secret, is to build from the pain.
You said something really interesting though, because the resilience sometimes sounds as though it is built on trauma. That almost sometimes trauma is what feeds it. Because you talk about those kids who are in bomb shelters. That can't, like that, it's great that they have the bomb shelters, right? And they have a safe place to retreat to. But most kids don't know what that's like, right? Our kids here don't know what that's like. And so it's sort of hard to hear that in the same sentence as resilience, right?
But I don't understand.
So I'm hearing you talk about the fact that like sometimes like when you talk about the Jewish people and how resilient the Jewish people
Right.
are, but you also talk about the fact that like in Israel right now there are kids in bomb shelters.
Right.
Right, and those kids, it can't be water off a duck's back.
No, they're
right?
not. They're not
It can't
heroes.
be.
No,
It can't
it's
be.
there's a price.
That's right.
There's a huge price. No, they're not. I'm not saying these families are resilient. I'm saying Jewish history, like the klal, the group, is resilient. Like they're just not going to give up. Individuals suffer. Individuals suffer a lot, and these kids are suffering. But there's something in the Jewish spirit, like through the decade, I mean the centuries, that has developed something, and I think it's from the Torah.
I mean, as a convert, one of the first things I learned was how miraculous it even is that there are Jews still living today. Like, and that this line has been around forever and ever. And it's like, I agree with what you're saying. It's our connection to Hashem, like, and the Torah. But I think what you were also saying was that the suffering that we endure gives us resilience on another. Like, it actually, it builds and builds over time, collectively as well.
See, but one doesn't choose suffering.
No.
Right?
No.
So I think there are a few components here. I think one is sacrifice. Is you have to have something, you have to be able to sacrifice, but you also have to know what you're sacrificing for. You know, when you talk about North America, I think one of the differences is the sense of loss of sacrifice, right? That you often find children who are very good at articulating their rights, but not so good at articulating what they might owe. It's about what I feel as opposed to what I owe. And I think that when Sherri talks about Jewish history, it's if you know where you came from and you know what was sacrificed for, what people, veterans understand this, then it actually creates a roadmap for the future on some level.
No, I think we would still be, first of all, I don't think that just going through suffering causes you to be resilient.
Right.
Because it can also crush you. I see a lot of people, I see people who die from it. It's not, but there's something about the Jewish people that they build and create. And you see it, I'm sure you see it here with Holocaust survivors also.
Yeah, you do. It's a sensitive subject for me because I'm a child of Holocaust survivors, and yeah, absolutely. And they my parents made a life for me, and as a consequence, I have daughters who I hope I'm making a nice life for. But my parents suffered, and we the generation right from that, we suffered too.
Right.
And yes, resilience for sure. My sister-in-law's here, and she knows what a Holocaust mother-in-law, a Holocaust surviving mother-in-law can be like. But it's a sensitive subject for me because that enormous suffering, definitely the toughness, the resilience. I don't know, Andrea, Tay, do you know anybody more resilient than
I've read these memoirs.
But it is the price that she paid throughout her life for that resilience, the terror, the tragedy, all of that.
Yeah, well, I'm speaking from, this is a weird word, but the luxury of suffering in Israel, where you have a community and where you have an army, and I think it's a different level of suffering.
I think we're all using certain words slightly interrelatedly.
Yeah.
When you talk about resilience, so there's a certain kind of resilience that's stoicism, and I experienced that growing up. But there's another kind of resilience that transcends stoicism, is actually something creative.
Survival.
But it's more than survival. That's why Sherri's talking about a kind of light, a building, a moving forward, a kind of creativity to reinvent yourself and your life, not just to endure in that sense of resilience, but something even beyond that, to be able to do better than just endurance. And I was curious, though, because you're right, some people are utterly crushed, some people, is there a factor? Is there something that you've learned in your work that is somehow a kind of crucial defining moment, whether it's going to completely bring you down or not? Now, some of it might be temperament, but beyond that, is there a factor that you've been able to isolate?
The only thing first of all, I think it's different for men and women, in general.
How?
Because, I saw my husband, he was ready to start doing, right away. And I needed to retreat. I just needed to be in my home, isolated, and kind of just licking my wounds kind of thing.
Okay, and beyond the gender?
Just for me, I see with the mothers, because we've worked with, hundreds of mothers, that the ones who go right back to work and just, put up a strong front, that they ultimately don't do as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because they haven't gone down. And so it's always chasing them. That's what I've experienced. And some mothers, they've told me that because they didn't have a place, and then they come to Karen Koby and they feel finally, there's a place for me to put my pain.
I had a question. Does the grief ever go away? Are there moments, even, 10, 15, 18 years later where it's comes back full force?
Oh yeah, for sure it comes. First of all, if you met me, you don't, I won't talk about it now, except publicly.
Except when I dragged her into these conversations.
No, I used to, I would get on any taxi driver, I would talk. I couldn't stop talking. But yeah, it definitely attacks you, around the yard site. We call it, that's why it's good to be in these groups with other bereaved mothers, because we call it yurtsite-itis. you are just dragged down, and even if we didn't know the date, it's something in the weather or the atmosphere that just starts bringing you to a place where you just feel like, oh, this is happening again. And then, sometimes like I'll see Koby's friends with their children. It's hard. It's not always simple. In fact, I had to go through this whole process of like a few years ago where I had to grieve his grandchildren, like his children, because all of a sudden all his friends were having kids. And I didn't realize, like, I knew it was hard for me, but then I went to a kind of healer and we started talking, and I had like this kind of vision, and I realized like I hadn't mourned that, and I had to mourn that.
Not just the loss of him, but the loss of everything that was going to come.
Right, but it was like, I knew it intellectually, but
Right.
then when I saw them,
Right.
and it was like, I didn't want to see them, but I didn't integrate it. Like, I just sort of pushed it away, and then all of a sudden I was with this healer, and it was like, oh, wow, I have to go through that and release it.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you a last question. Do you believe in fate? Like, do you believe in providence, the idea that things happen for a reason, or do you actually believe in randomness in life?
Well, first of all, Rabbi Soloveitchik talks about it, like the difference between fate and destiny. Because
Yes, he
fate
does.
is just what falls upon you. But destiny is that it has like some sort of purpose. And I just feel like my life has been like just this kind of fate turned to destiny. But that just when I start, like, of course, faith also, though, even in believing in destiny, it's not something that just, it's not static. Like, it goes up, it ebbs and flows, kind of. But I was thinking about this question because just the things that have happened, like my grandson was born on a Friday that was the right before the Parsha of Amalek, where we talk about like taking what do we say? Like, taking the enemy down.
Right,
like we're not going to forget him.
Right. I'm like the sort of enemy of the Jewish people.
So it was like, and I was with her, and like the baby was born just before we went into that Parsha, and then I feel like the Brit was on Purim in Jerusalem, and it's like the day where like lafoch, to reverse everything and to bring like joy to the people. And I just felt like this is not just chance that my first grandson is born like on this Parsha. Like, I mean, you could just say, oh, it just kind of happened,
Mm-hmm.
but
You could.
but I really felt it as a sense of like destiny. And also Rabbi Steinsaltz was the Sandek. So, now he's not well. So it was like all these forces that came together. Also, like the baby was named, not the first name, the second name is after Koby, but then the third name is Mordechai, and he was after, not just from Purim, but from my son-in-law, his grandmother. It was her brother, was killed during the Holocaust. And we didn't even know. She told him later that, and he asked her, Avraham, my son-in-law, how old was Mordechai when he died? And she said he was 13, which is how old Koby was. So it was like, it's these kind of uncanny things, but that not, where it's just not coincidence. It's
So I think
like,
you've answered my question. you really do. And I saw that in Blessings of Broken Heart, too. You really interpret your life in a meaningful way. In other words, I think narratives create structures on events. Like, events happen to us, and we choose to narrate them either in a kind of purposeful way, we see meaning in them, but we could also narrate them in random ways, and you choose not to do that. You choose to see meaning in a lot of the things that happen. even like birds flying into your house and things like that. And I assume you see that as very helpful in navigating your way through.
Well, I'm always looking for it. I feel like I lost it because now we have too many birds, and I'm trying to get rid of the birds. My first book is all about birds. No, but I feel like sometimes it's unavoidable. Like the things that have happened that are just, they're so blatant that it's like, in the Road to Resilience, I talk about finding coherence in the chaos. But sometimes it's like the sign is right there.
Mhm.
You can't, it's like in neon.
It would be foolish to think otherwise, in other words. It's
Right,
really-
like I
it's really
wasn't this
obvious.
kind of person. I'm not a signs and wonder person.
Right, right.
But I feel like it was just given to me.
Mhm. Any other thoughts around the room? Yep.
I'm not sure how to phrase this even, but talking about the birds and everything, and I remember reading the book. So how does that affect your feelings about afterlife? That's a really big question, but just wondered. Like, do you feel like once someone is gone, that's it? Or did you feel that Koby was still with you? I guess that's the question.
Well, the first year I definitely felt he was with me. But then I really feel like then the soul kind of goes, that they leave, because I used to think of it like they're like in some like spa, like some like great retreat spa, like doing jacuzzis and getting massages. I mean, whatever's analogous on the soul, so there's no point in them coming back here. So I felt like they leave like
They're
this.
there maybe for a while.
Yeah, that there's no reason for them except maybe to like look in every so often. But no, I feel like they leave. Like the soul has its own kingdom, and it's not this world somehow. That's my feeling.
Okay. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
It's so positive that, and I'm so happy to hear that you had the friendships and the community support. What would you suggest to somebody who's bereaved, regardless of the circumstances, that doesn't have that, but is in the process and has been in the process of trying to find someone to talk to, someone to bring guidance or healing, and is feeling, it's very hard to build community while you're in process, and because there is this notion. I had a grief person tell me a number of years ago, my mother was sick for 33 years, so I had to deal with this for a very long time, that we live in a grief illiterate society, and it basically encompasses what you've been talking about. People run away from it. They're afraid that they're gonna get some cooties from it. It's gonna start affecting their life in some mystical way. But I do feel like I need support, and I feel very isolated. Even
Well, there
friends.
are groups though. I'm sure. I know there's grief groups in Toronto.
Yeah, I started, but I mean, just
Also on the internet, like I was in a group on the internet of like Jewish bereaved mothers. This was a long time ago, and it really helped me. Even if you don't like write anything, just to see that other people are in the same situation. And also the community can be one other person. It doesn't have to be a big group. And then the other thing I say is like make a group. Like sometimes I know it's hard because it's like it's not the right, you don't have the strength, let's say. But sometimes it can just give you strength to like make the group, because if you're struggling, there's other people struggling too. But I think the internet is the best thing. Just go on, find
It's like you found
a group on the internet. Or a psychologist. Like you have to push yourself. The thing is, you can't do grieving alone. And there are resources I know in Toronto, but I don't know who they are because I don't live here.
And based on today's weather, I'm sure that's not gonna change. Okay, so Sherri, I want to thank you very much for being with us and sharing your heart and sharing your ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I just want to say, oh wait, but then the book is for sale. I don't know what it is in Canadian. It's like $15 and $20 in American dollars.
We'll just call it $100 even.
Okay.